Hi everybody, welcome back. This is going to be the first of several, I think we'll have a total of 4, videos about Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. We are going to read the entire book. It works out, including the introduction, to about 67 pages, so it's not tremendously long, but there's some really good stuff in here and I didn't want you guys to miss out. So anyway, we're going to do Fit 1, which is basically section 1, today, and then we'll have subsequent videos covering different sections. So what do you need to know in order to start? Well, in Schoology, you have your PDF. We are using the translation by Simon Armitage. So go ahead and open up your PDF. And then also in your Schoology, there's directions on how to set up your notes if you're using paper, or an example if you just want to use an electronic document like Word or Google Docs or something. There's an example that basically you can either use or cut and paste from. We are going to set up our notes in a 2-column format. Okay, and here's mine already done. And you'll notice that I have things highlighted and I have some page numbers written. That's because as we read, we're going to highlight stuff we see. So grab a highlighter if you're keeping paper notes, or have your highlighter tool ready if you're doing electronic. And then underneath, we're going to do page numbers of where we see those elements. Now, why are we doing this? 1, our entire goal, our LEQ, our lesson essential question, is how are the ideas of chivalry developed in medieval romance? Well, in order to do that, we have to track both chivalry and medieval romance, right? The elements of both. So in order to track the elements of both, we've got 2 columns and we're going to track them as we go. The second reason we're highlighting and doing page numbers is after we're finished reading, you're going to have a choice of either creative writing element with this or an essay. And the essay is going to be much, much easier if you have very good notes. Okay? All right, so to start out, have your notes by you. And I've got my highlighter. Okay, I've got my green highlighter because it's the Green Knight. And go ahead and open up your PDF and scroll down to page 8 in your PDF, past all the introduction. The introduction is very interesting and I would recommend you read it, but I'm not going to include it in this particular lesson. Okay? All right, so I'm going to read Fit the First, or Fit 1, F-I-T-T, which is an Old English word, or Middle English word, meaning section. Now, before we get into this, something I want you to notice. First of all, you're going to see a ton of alliteration in here. And if you remember when we read Beowulf, alliteration was what they used instead of rhyme, right? Because Old English doesn't rhyme very well. So they used alliteration to build rhythm into their poetry. Well, here in Middle English, we are going to see that same technique being used, but it's also being used alongside rhyme. So, and the translator, Simon Armitage here, who's moved it from Middle English into Modern English, has really made an effort to keep both the rhythm and the alliteration and the rhyme intact. So you're going to see alliteration for the first part of each stanza, and then rhyme at the end. Okay? All right. You ready? Here we go. We're on page 8. Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, Fit 1. Once the siege and assault of Troy had ceased, with the city a smoke heap of cinders and ash, the traitor who contrived such betrayal there was tried for his treachery, the truest on earth. So Aeneas, it was, with his noble warriors, went conquering abroad, laying claim to the crowns of the wealthiest kingdoms in the western world. Mighty Romulus quickly careened towards Rome and conceived a city in magnificent style, which from then until now has been known by his name. Titius constructed townships in Tuscany. This is Tuscany's in Italy. And Langobard did likewise, building homes in Lombardy. Lombardy is in France. And further afield over the Sea of France, on Britain's broad hilltops, Felix Brutus made his stand, and wonder, dread, and war have lingered in that land, where loss and love in turn have held the upper hand. Okay, what is he doing? Why is he starting a poem about King Arthur and a Green Knight with the fall of Troy in ancient Greece? What is he doing? Well, the author is establishing the continuing ruling kingship of Arthur, who we're going to see in a minute, all the way back to the fall of Troy and Aeneas, who founded Rome, right? Because Aeneas, at least in the literature, founds Rome, and Romulus and Remus build Rome, right? So that's the father of Italy. Well, what conquered England? The Roman Empire, right? So our poet is establishing a continuity here. Okay, carrying on. After Britain was built by this founding father, a bold race bred there, battle-happy men, causing trouble and torment in turbulent times. And though through history more strangeness has happened here than anywhere else I know of on earth, but the most regal of rulers in the royal line was Arthur, who I heard is honored above all. And the inspiring story I intend to spin has moved the hearts and minds of many, an awesome episode in the legends of Arthur. So, listen a little while to my tale, if you will, and I'll tell it as it's told in the town where it trips from the tongue, and as it has been inked in stories bold and strong, through letters which, once linked, have lasted loud and long. And excuse me when I pause, because I'm scrolling through the document as I read it. So now he's saying, come listen to my story. I'm going to tell you a story that happened in King Arthur's time, and he's the best king. Okay, so now here is where it starts to get good. The reason we are doing this actually now at the end of November, beginning of December, is because this is set in Camelot at Christmas. So this is a Christmas story. And like every good Christmas story, it's a little bit creepy, a little bit weird, and lots of adventure. So here we go. Oh, hang on. Before we do that, we need to talk about what Catholic Christmas looked like in the Middle Ages. Okay? In modern America, we tend to start our Christmas celebrations in like November, right? Right after our Thanksgiving, we put up our trees and things. And then we tend to do like 12 days of Christmas, but like leading up to Christmas. And then kind of we do Christmas, and then we have these weird 2 weeks, and then we do New Year, and then everything's kind of back to normal. In Catholic Christmas, and particularly Middle Ages Christmas, in the 4 weeks leading up to Christmas, you had Advent, which is a period of waiting, prayer, fasting, getting ready for Jesus' birth, right? And lots of prayer. You don't eat a lot of fancy stuff. Okay. Then Christmas Day happens, right? And then the 12 days of Christmas start. And there was a celebration for about 2 weeks, which leads all the way through New Year's, so it included New Year's, and all the way to Three Kings Day, which is in the beginning of January. So the Christmas celebrations would last from Christmas Day to Three Kings Day, all across those weeks, usually about 2 weeks. And just food and celebration and fun. Okay, so when they mention Christmas and then they mention New Year, that's why they're like happening together, because the Christmas celebrations reach across New Year's. And some of your families might still celebrate that way. I mean, my family does Advent and then Christmas celebrations, and we leave our Christmas tree up till Three Kings Day. Sometimes longer if I don't get it down. All right, so it was Christmas at Camelot, King Arthur's court, where the great and the good of the land had gathered, all the righteous lords of the ranks of the Round Table quite properly carousing and reveling in pleasure. Time after time, in tournaments of joust, they had lunged at each other with leveled lances, then returned to the castle to carry on their caroling. for the feasting lasted a full fortnight in one day, with more food and drink than a fellow could dream of. The hubbub of their humor was heavenly to hear, pleasant dialogue by day, dancing after dusk. So the house and its hall were lit with happiness, and the lords and ladies were luminous with joy. Such a coming together of the gracious and the glad, the most chivalrous and courteous knights known to Christendom. Okay, take a look at your notes. Look at the elements of romance and the vivid descriptions. In this whole section, this whole page 9, we're going to see tons of vivid description. So highlight your vivid description, and let's put some page numbers where you see it. Okay? And we also got the mention of chivalry, didn't we? So we're going to pay attention to how they are chivalrous and courteous knights. Okay. You ready? The most wonderful women to have walked in this world, the handsomest king to be crowned at court, fine folks with their futures before them here in that hall. Their highly honored king was happiest of all. No nobler knights had come within a castle's wall. With New Year so young, it still yawned and stretched. Helpings were doubled on the dais that day. Dais is that slightly higher place where the king and queen and fancy people sit. And you're going to see this throughout the story. Helpings were doubled. They're getting like even more food than usual. And as the king and company were coming to the hall, the choir in the chapel fell suddenly quiet. Then a chorus erupted from the courtiers and clerks. "Noel!" they cheered. And then, "Noel, Noel, New Year's gifts!" The knights cried next as they pressed forward to offer their presents, teasing with frivolous favors and forfeits, till the ladies who lost couldn't help but laugh, and the undefeated were far from forlorn. Okay, so they're playing games with their gifts, like, because we know that because there are people who lost and people who were undefeated. So they're playing some sort of game where they get gifts, and they're yelling Noel. Well, remember the court speaks French, right? And Noel is a French word meaning Christmas. Okay. Their merrymaking rolled on in this manner until mealtime, when, washed and worthy, they went to the table, and were seated in order of honor, as was apt, with Guinevere, this is the queen, in their gathering, gloriously framed at her place on the platform, pricelessly curtained by silk to each side, and canopied across with French weave and fine tapestry from the far east. So she's got her fancy chair, and around her chair are these curtains that go up, over, and down, and they're made of really fancy material. Studded with stones and stunning gems, pearls beyond pocket, pearls beyond purchase or price. But not one stone outshone the quartz of the queen's eyes. With hand on heart, no one could argue otherwise. So she is more beautiful even than the gems around her. Okay, you might want to add that to vivid description. Okay. Now this reminds me of some of you guys. But Arthur would not eat until all were served. He brimmed with ebullience, because normally, like, the king gets served first, and he eats first, right? He's waiting till everybody else is served, and then he's basically, like, bouncing up and down. He's just full of energy. He brimmed with ebullience, being almost boyish in his love of life, and what he liked the least was to sit still and watch the seasons slip by. His blood was busy, and he buzzed with thoughts, and the matter which played on his mind at that moment was his pledge to take no portion from his plate on such a special day until a story was told, or some far-fetched yarn or outrageous fable, the tallest of tales, yet one ringing with truth, like the action-packed epics of men-at-arms, or till some chancer had challenged his chosen knight, dared him with a lance to lay life on the line, to stare death face to face, and accept defeat should fortune or fate smile more favorably on his foe. Within Camelot's castle this was the custom, and at feasts and festivals when the fellowship would meet, with features proud and fine he stood there tall and straight, a king at Christmas time, amid great merriment. So Arthur has promised that he won't eat any of his food until something exciting happens or someone tells a good story, because he doesn't want to be bored. Have you ever felt like that? Like you're just like waiting for something exciting to happen. Okay. And, wish for excitement, get excitement. You ready? And still he stands there, just being himself, chatting away charmingly, exchanging views. The good Sir Gawain is seated by Guinevere, and at Arthur's other side sits Agravain the Hard Hand. Isn't that a great name, Agravain the Hard Hand? Both nephews of the king and notable knights. At the head of the table, sat Bishop Baldwin as Arthur's guest of honor, and Owain, son of Urien, to eat beside him. So they're telling us who's at this main table. And as soon as the nobles had sampled the spread, the stalwarts on the benches to both sides were served. So just like in a mead hall, remember, the king and the important people sit up front, and then there's lots of benches for everybody else to sit. And so the king and fancy people are served first, and then everybody else is served. The first course comes in to the fanfare and clamor of blasting trumpets. Doo 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 doo, food is here. Hung with trembling banners, so there's like fabric coming down from the trumpets. You've seen that in movies. Then pounding double drums and dining pipes, weird sounds and wails of such warbled wildness that to hear and feel them made the heart float free. Can you imagine? You're at a feast, you're at a party, and like music plays as the food is carried in? And the freshest of foods, so many in fact, there was scarce place to present the stews or set the soups in the silver bowls on the cloth. Each guest received his share of bread or meat or broth, 12 plates per pair, plus beer or wine or both. So there's so much food, there's not even room enough for it all on the table, and everybody has like 12 plates in front of them, and beer and wine, and sometimes both. So basically everybody has everything they want. So if you wanted to add some more vivid description, you can there. We're definitely getting descriptions of the food. But you ever read a book where the descriptions just went on so long and they got boring? So has this author, because look what he says next. Now, on the subject of supper, I'll say no more, as it's obvious to everyone that no one went without. So he's done describing food. Because another sound, a new sound, suddenly drew near, which might signal the king to sample his supper. Like, this might be the exciting thing that the king was waiting for. For barely had the horns finished blowing their breath, and with starters just spooned to the seated guests, a fearful form appeared, framed in the door, a mountain of a man, immeasurably high, a hulk of a human from head to hips, so long and thick in his loins and his limbs, I would genuinely judge him to be a half-giant, or a most massive man, the mightiest of mortals, but handsome too, as any horseman worth his horse, for despite the bulk and brawn of his body, his stomach and waist were slender and sleek. So he's like all built, all muscly up top, and then sort of narrows a very narrow waist and, narrow stomach. So he's like, think like Captain America, like that kind of build, But he's literally sitting on a horse. He rode a horse into the dining hall. In fact, all the features, he was finely formed, it seemed, so he's a very good-looking guy. Amazement seized their minds. No soul had ever seen a knight of such a kind, entirely emerald green. Wait, what? This guy is literally green? He's literally green. And his gear and garments were green as well. A tight-fitting tunic tailored to his torso, a cloak to cover him, the cloth fully lined with smooth shorn fur clearly showing, and faced with all white ermine, as was the hood, worn shawled on his shoulders, shucked from his head. So he's got a cloak with fur inside, and instead of wearing it up over his head, he's got it like back on his shoulder. On his lower limbs, his leggings were also green, wrapped closely around his calves, and his sparkling spurs were green gold, strapped with stripy silk, and were set on his stockings, for the stranger was shoeless. The dude is not wearing any boots or any shoes. He's got spurs tied to his ankles, and he's wearing socks but no shoes. That's weird. All of his vestments, he revealed himself veritably verdant. Verdant is another way of saying green. From his belt hooks and buckle to the baubles and gems arrayed so richly around his costume and adorning the saddle, stitched into silk, the details of his dress were difficult to describe. Embroidered as it was with butterflies and birds, so like his clothing and the fabric that's on the saddle of his horse, because medieval horses, right, often had like head cloths and cloths around their bodies. It's all embroidered with butterflies and birds. Notice nature? Pay attention to that. Green beads emblazoned on a background of gold. All the horse's tack. Now I know some of you guys are horse folks, so you'll know the words that he's using here. Harness strap, hind strap, the eye of the bit, each alloy and enamel, and the stirrups he stood in were similarly tinted. And the same with the cantle and the skirts of the saddle, all glimmering and glinting with the greenest jewels. And the horse? Every hair was green, from hoof to mane, a steed of pure green stock. Each snort and shudder strained the hand-stitched bridle, but his rider had him reined. Okay, so the man's skin is green, his clothing is green, his horse is green, everything that they're wearing is either green or gold. The fellow in green was in fine fettle. The hair of his head was as green as his horse. Fine flowing locks which fanned across his back, so he must have long hair, plus a bushy green beard growing down to his breast, a big beard, and his face hair along the hair of his head was lopped in a line at elbow length, so half his arms were gowned in green growth, crimped at the collar like a king's cape. The mane of his mount was groomed to match, combed and knotted into curlicues, then tinseled with gold, tied and twisted green over gold, green over gold. The fetlocks were finished in the same fashion, with bright green ribbons, braided with beads, and as was the tail to its tippity-tip, and a long tied thong lacing it tight was strung with green bells, which resounded and shone. No waking man had witnessed such a warrior or weird warhorse. Otherworldly, yet flesh and bone. Okay, this guy looks gorgeous, amazing, fancy, but weird. Like otherworldly, but also flesh and bone. He's really weird, but he's also clearly real. A look of lightning flashed from somewhere in his soul. The force of that man's fist would be a thunderbolt. Okay, so he's clearly a warrior. This is clearly a war horse. Sure, they're dressed up fancy, but he's clearly like a fighter. Yet, he wore no helmet, nor no hauberk either. Hauberk is the part of the helmet that goes in front of your face. No armored apparel or plate was apparent, and he swung no sword, nor sported any shield, but held in one hand a sprig of holly. So think about, that holly you see at Christmas time, right? The green plant with the red berries. Who's holding that? Of all the evergreens, the greenest ever. It's called evergreen because, in cold climates, holly is still green at Christmas time, in the middle of winter. And in the other hand held the mother of all axes, a cruel piece of kit, I kid you not. The head was an ell in length at least, and forged in green steel with a gilt finish. Was inlaid with iron from end to end, with green pigment picking out impressive designs. From stock to neck, where it stopped with a knot, a lace was looped the length of the haft, trimmed with tassels and tails of string, fastened firmly in place by forest green buttons. So he's got this big fancy axe, and just like everything else, it's gold and green, but it's a heck of an axe. And he kicks on, canters through that crowded hall towards the top table, not the least bit timid, cocksure of himself, sitting high in the saddle, Dude is riding in and riding up to the front table where the king is. "And who," he bellows without breaking breath, "is the governor of this gaggle? I'll be glad to know. It's with him and him alone I'll have my say." The green man stared his gaze deep into every eye, explored each person's face to probe for a reply. Now, okay, I know you've never had this particular weird thing happen, but you've definitely had this, where the teacher, you've got a really stern teacher, right? And the teacher's like, who did something or whatever, and everybody goes silent and tries not to make eye contact. That's what everybody's doing here. Nobody wants to make eye contact because he's like, okay, who's in charge? The guests looked on. They gawped and they gawked and were mute with amazement. What did it mean that human and horse could develop this hue, should grow to be grass green, or greener still, like green enamel emboldened with bright gold? Some stood and stared, then stepped a little closer. Drawn to the knight to know his next move. They'd seen some sights, but this was something special, a miracle or magic, or so they imagined. Okay, pause for a minute. Go look at your elements of romance. And the very last one is supernatural, right? And we've had at least 2 references to this guy being otherworldly now. So you might want to tag those pages. Okay? All right. Yet, several of the lords were like statues in their seats, left speechless and rigid, not risking a response. The hall fell hushed, as if all who were present had slipped into sleep or some trance-like state. No doubt not all were stunned and stilled by dread, but duty-bound to hold their tongues until their sovereign could respond. So maybe they weren't all overawed. Some were just quiet because they're waiting for Arthur to talk. Then the king acknowledged this curious occurrence, cordially addressed him, keeping his cool. Okay, look at chivalry, right? And remember, one of them is to refrain from giving offense, like try not to hurt other people's feelings for no reason. That's what he's trying to do here. He's trying to be polite. Because this guy is clearly a knight. He's clearly a warrior, right? He's just turned up. Okay. You ready? Because we're going to see quite a bit of chivalry right here in this next section. "A warm welcome, sir." This is the king talking to the knight. "This winter's night. My name is Arthur. I am head of this house. Won't you slide from that saddle and stay a while, and this business which brings you we shall learn of later." "No," said the knight. "It's not in my nature to idle or alack about this evening. But because your acclaim is so loudly chorused, and your castle and brotherhood are called the best, the strongest men to ever mount the saddle, the worthiest knights ever known to the world, both in competition and true combat, and since courtesy, as it's said, is championed here, I'm intrigued and attracted to your door at this time." So he's like, I've heard your reputation of your knights, right? And that's why I'm here. "Be assured by this holland stem," the holly, "here in my hand, that I mean no menace. So expect no malice, for if I'd slogged here tonight to slay and slaughter, my helmet and hauberk wouldn't be at home, and my sword and spear would be here at my side, and more weapons of war, as I'm sure you're aware. I'm clothed for peace, not kitted out for conflict. But if you're half as honorable as I've heard folks say, you'll gracefully grant me this game, which I ask you by right." Okay, so he says, I'm not here to fight. I'm clothed for peace. I didn't bring any weapons with me. Not to mention the giant axe we saw described a minute ago, but never mind. It's like, I've got this holly branch in my hand. I'm clearly here for peace, and I'm here to ask you to play a game. I'm not sure you should play games that strangers propose when they ride horses into your court, but okay. But remember, Arthur was looking for something interesting, right? All right, so Arthur replies. Then Arthur answered, Knight, most courteous, you claim a fair unarmored fight. We'll see you have the same. So if you want to fight without armor or weapons, okay, we'll have a fight. I'm spoiling for no scrap, I swear. Besides, these bodies on these benches are just bum-fluffed bairns. Oh, that's a great phrase. Bairns is Scottish for babies. So he's like, I didn't come here for a fight, and besides which, these guys sitting at your tables here, these knights you have, they're just babies. If I'd ridden to your castle rigged out for a ruck, these lightweight adolescents wouldn't last a minute. But it's Yuletide, the time of youthfulness, yes? So at Christmas in this court I lay down a challenge. If a person here present within these premises is big or bold or red-blooded enough to strike me one stroke and be struck in return, I shall give him as a gift this gigantic cleaver, and the axe shall be his to handle how he likes. All right, go look at the chivalry one that says, never refuse a challenge from an equal. The Green Knight has just laid down a challenge and said, if anybody in here is brave enough to take up my challenge, here's the game. You get to hit me once, and however you hit me, I'll hit you back. Okay, it doesn't actually sound like much of a game, but it gets a little more complicated. So in the never refuse a challenge, you might want to write down this page 14. Here we go. Here's the rest of the details. And whoever wins the game, whoever's brave enough to take up the challenge, right, and take the stroke, is going to win the axe. Okay. I'll kneel, this is the Green Knight still talking, I'll kneel, bare my neck, and take the first knock. Who has the gall, the gumption, the guts? Who'll spring from his seat and snatch this weapon? I offer the axe. Who'll have it as his own? I'll offer one free hit from which I won't flinch, and promise that 12 months will pass in peace, then claim the duty I deserve in 1 year and 1 day. Does no one have the nerve to wager in this way? All right, 2 things, right? You're noticing, just like in The Wife of Bat's Tale, we've got a challenge here that's 1 year and a day happening in King Arthur's court. That must have been a trope to have turned up in 2 very different stories by very different writers. Second thing, you notice he's already guiding them into the kind of stroke that he thinks that they should make, right? He's going to bare his neck, which means he's basically encouraging them to hit him in the neck with this axe, right? And then 1 year and a day later, he's going to hit them back in exactly the same way. Except, if you hit someone in the neck with an axe, they're probably not going to be around 1 year and a day later to hit you back, right? Okay. So he's issued this challenge. How do you think the knights are going to react to this? Flustered at first, now totally foxed, were the household and the lords, both the highborn and the low. So everybody's like, what? You want us to do what? What? Still stirruped, so he's still on his horse, the knight swiveled round in his saddle, looking left and right, his red eyes, he's green with red eyes, his red eyes rolling beneath the bristles of his bushy green brows, his beard swishing from side to side. When the court kept its counsel, he cleared his throat and stiffened his spine. And then he spoke his mind. So, here is the house of Arthur, he scoffed, whose virtues reverberate across vast realms. Where's the fortitude and fearlessness you're so famous for, and the breathtaking bravery and the big-mouth bragging? The towering reputation of the Round Table, skittled and sculptured by a stranger. What scandal! You flap and you flinch, and I've not raised a finger. And then he laughed so loud their leader saw red. So he's taunting the knights, and he's like, oh, you big brave knights and all your big reputation, all it took was one challenge from one stranger. He's calling them out. And Arthur, his temper's up, right? Okay, this is Arthur, the king. Blood flowed to his fine-featured face, and he raged inside. His men were also hurt. These words had pricked their pride. But born so brave at heart, the king stepped up one stride. Okay, go look at your chivalry. Do you see one of them that's like guard the honor of fellow knights? Try highlighting that and put this page 15. Okay, and also the never refuse a challenge we're seeing here, Arthur responding to that challenge. Your request, he countered, is quite insane, and folly finds the man who flirts with the fool. No warrior worth his salt would be worried by your words, so in heaven's good name, hand over the axe, and I'll happily fulfill the favor you ask. He strides to him swiftly and seizes his arm. The man-mountain dismounts in one mighty leap. Then Arthur grips the axe, grasps it by its half, and takes it above him, intending to attack. Okay, so this guy gets off his horse. Arthur goes over to him. The guy gets down. Arthur grabs the axe and goes like this and is like swinging it over his head because he has lost his patience. But look how the Green Knight reacts. I mean, you'd be pretty freaking out if the king was swinging an axe at you, right? Look at how the Green Knight reacts. Yet the stranger before him stands up straight, highest in the house by at least a head. He's at least a head taller than everyone else there. Quite simply, he stands there, stroking his beard, fiddling with his coat, his face without fear, about to be bludgeoned, but no more bothered than a guest at the table being given a goblet of wine. So he's just like, whatever, Arthur, whatever. By Guinevere, Gawain now to his king inclines. Okay, Gawain stands up, and he's over by Guinevere, and says, I stake my claim. This moment must be mine. Should you call me, courteous lord, said Gawain to his king, to rise from my seat and stand at your side, politely take leave of my place at the table, and quit without causing offense to my queen, then I shall come to your council before this great court. Okay, we're going to pause for a minute. Go look at your chivalry stuff. Isn't there one about honoring women? And serving your lord, serving your king. Okay, so put your page 16 there. Gawain is asking permission to leave the table because he doesn't want to disrespect the queen or the king, but he's asking permission to come to the king and basically take up the challenge instead of the king. And here's why he thinks that the king shouldn't do it. For I find it unfitting, as my fellow knights would, when a deed of such daring is dangled before us, that you take on this trial, tempted as you are, when brave, bold men are seated on these benches, men never matched in the mettle of their minds, never beaten or bettered on the field of battle. I am the weakest of your warriors and feeblest of wit. Loss of my life would be grieved the least. Were I not your nephew, my life would mean nothing. To be born of your blood is my body's only claim. Such a foolish affair is unfitting for a king. So, being first to come forward, it should fall to me. And if my proposal is improper, let no person stand blame. Okay, so remember back when we read Beowulf? That like the youngest, most untested warrior, Wiglaf, is the one who actually like steps up when Beowulf needs him at the end? Well, here, the youngest, most untested warrior is Gawain. It's not that he's never been in battle or anything. He's just like the youngest guy. And he's the king's nephew, which is the only reason he says he's at all important. Otherwise, he'd just be like the lowliest knight in the thing. And he stands up and says, it's not proper for my king to take on such a silly charge. Let me do it. Okay. And then the knighthood then unites, and each knight says the same. Their king can stand aside and give Gawain the game. Oh yeah, now everybody steps up. Everybody's like, oh yeah, Gawain should do it, Gawain should do it. And so the sovereign instructed his knight to stand. Getting to his feet, he moved graciously forward and knelt before Arthur, taking hold of the axe. So he's honoring his king. Letting go of it, Arthur then held up his hand and gave young Gawain the blessing of God, and hope he finds firmness in heart and fist. Okay, pause for a minute. Go look at your notes here. Isn't fearing God one of your elements of chivalry? Yeah. And actually, if you flip, it's also an element of romance, the Christianity, right? And while we're there, you can highlight chivalry in your element of romance, because we've definitely had chivalry. Okay. And that's all page 16. All right, let's look back at the story. This is Arthur speaking to Gawain. Take care, young cousin, to catch him cleanly. Use full-blooded force, then you needn't fear the blow that he threatens to trade in return. So if you kill him now, you won't have to worry about him hitting you back. Gawain, with the weapon, walked towards the warrior, and they stood face to face, not one man afraid. Then the Green Knight spoke, growled at Gawain. Before we compete, repeat what we've promised, and start by saying your name to me, sir, and tell me the truth so I can take it on trust. All right, pause for a minute. Go look at chivalry. Isn't speaking the truth one of them? And to keep the faith or keeping promises? Okay, highlight those, page 16. All right, so Gawain and the Green Knight are face to face, and he told Gawain, repeat the deal, repeat the promise, and tell me who you are. In good faith, it's Gawain, said the God-fearing knight. I heave this axe, and whatever happens after, in 12 months' time, I'll be struck in return with any weapon you wish, and by you and you alone. The other answers, well, by my living bones, I welcome you, Gawain, to bring the blade head home. Gawain, said the Green Knight, by God, I'm glad the favor I've called for will fall from your fist. You've perfectly repeated the promises we've made, and the terms of the contest are crystal clear, except for one thing. You must solemnly swear that you'll seek me out yourself, that you'll search me out to the ends of the earth to earn the same blow, as you dole today in this decorous hall. Okay, so the Green Knight is adding an element. After you're in a day, to take the same hit, Gawain has to come find him and find where he lives and take the hit there, instead of the Green Knight coming back to the court. But there's a problem, right? Nobody knows who this guy is. But where will you be? Where's your abode? You're a man of mystery, as God is my maker. Which court do you come from, and what are you called? There is knowledge I need, including your name. Then, by wit, I'll work out the way to your door and keep to our contract, so cross my heart. But enough at New Year. It needs nothing more, said the war man in green to worthy Gawain. I could tell you the truth once you'd taken the blow. If you smite me smartly, I could spell out the facts of my house and my home and my name, if it helps. Then you'll pay me a visit and vouch for our pact. Or, if I keep quiet, you might cope much better, loafing and lounging here, looking no further. But you stall. Okay, so the Green Knight has said, I will tell you who I am and where to find me after you hit me. And if I can't talk after you hit me, you're off the hook. So he's really encouraging Gawain here to kill him, right? Or to hurt him so badly that he can't talk. And he's like, you're stalling. Now grasp that gruesome axe and show your striking style. He answered, since you ask, and touched the tempered steel. Okay. In the standing position, he prepared to be struck. All right, I'm going to stand up here. So, the Green Knight is standing. He bent forward, revealing a flash of green flesh as he heaped his hair to the crown of his head. So the Green Knight is standing like this, and he pulls his hair up so that Gawain can see his neck. Gawain grips the axe and heaves it heavenward, plants his left foot firmly on the floor in front, then swings it swiftly towards the bear's skin. The cleanness of the strike cleaved the spinal cord and parted the fat and flesh so far that the bright steel blade took a bite from the floor. So he hits the guy in the neck so cleanly that it goes all the way through his neck and all the bites into the floor. The handsome head tumbles onto the earth, and the king's men kick it as it clatters past. Imagine, right? You're sitting at your benches and there's this head rolling by, and you kick it like a football to get it away from you. Blood, we're going to get kind of gruesome here. Blood gutters brightly against his green gown. Yet, the man doesn't shudder or stagger or sink. Okay, the guy has had his head cut off, but he doesn't fall over. The head rolls across the floor. His body's still standing there bleeding. And watch what it does. But trudges towards them on those tree trunk legs and rummages around, reaching at their feet, and cops hold of his head and hoists it high. Wait, what? The body walks over, finds the head, and lifts it up. The guy's not dead. Even though his head's been cut off, he's not dead. Plot twist. Okay, go look at your romance elements and highlight plot twist and put page 17. And also supernatural, page 17, right? Okay, now the game has totally changed though, right? Because it was, now Gawain is sitting there going, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, right? Because now you've hit a guy in the head and cut off his head, but he's not dead. And so in a year and a day, he's going to cut off your head. So he grabs his head, it's this body, he hoists it high, and strides to his steed, snatches the bridle, steps into the stirrups, and swings into the saddle, still gripping his head by a handful of hair. It's like the Headless Horseman. He gets on his horse. Then he settles himself in his seat with the ease of a man unmarked, never mind being minus his head. And then when he wheeled about, his bloody neck still bled. Ew, he's holding his head and it's still bleeding. His point was proved. The court was deadened now with dread. For that scalp and skull now swung from his fist. Towards the top table he turned the face, and it opened its eyelids, stared straight ahead, and spoke this speech, which you'll hear for yourselves. Sir Gawain, be wise enough to keep your word, and faithfully follow me until I'm found, as you vowed in this hall, within hearing of these horsemen. You are charged with getting to the Green Chapel to reap what you have sown. You'll rightfully receive the justice you are due just as January dawns. Men know my name as the Green Chapel Knight, and even a fool couldn't fail to find me. So come, or be called a coward forever. So now he said who he is and where to find him, and said, you better show up, and I'm gonna deal you the blow you dealt me, or be called a coward forever. Okay, look at your chivalry. Right? Keep your promises, finish what you started. He's calling him out. If you don't show up, then you're not a knight, because you don't have chivalry. Okay. With a tug of the reins, he twisted around, and head still in hand, galloped out of the hall. So the hooves brought fire from the flame in the flint. So he gallops out so fast, there's fire sparking off the horse's hooves. Which kingdom he came from, they hadn't a clue, no more than they knew where he made for next. And then, well, as with the green man gone, they laughed and grinned again, and yet such goings-on were magic to those men. They are so relieved the guy is gone that they actually start laughing. And although King Arthur was awestruck at heart, no sign of it showed, right? He can't show his panic because, he's in charge, so he's got to keep everybody calm. Instead, he spoke to his Queen of Queens with courteous words. "Dear lady, don't be daunted by this deed today. It's in keeping that such strangeness should occur at Christmas, between sessions of banter and seasonal songs, amid the lively pastimes of ladies and lords. At least I'm allowed to eat at last, having witnessed such wonder, wouldn't you say?" And he glanced at Gawain and was graceful with his words. Okay, he's playing this off like he thinks it's a game. And he's trying to keep everybody calm. And now he's going to turn to Gawain, who now is facing death, right, in a year and a day. "Now hang up your axe. One hack is enough." So it dangled from the drape behind the dais, so that men who saw it would be mesmerized and amazed. So he hangs up the axe, and everybody who sees it tells the story. And give voice on its evidence to that stunning event. Then the two of them turned and walked to the table, the monarch and his man, and were met with food, double dishes apiece, rare delicacies, all manner of meals, and the music of minstrels, and they danced and sang till the sun went down that day. But mind your mood, Gawain. Keep blacker thoughts at bay, or lose this lethal game you've promised you will play. Ooh. And that is where the first section ends. Okay, look again at your notes, highlight anything that you think we've seen, and put your page numbers. Okay, and then go do your discussion question. And I will see you next time for Fit the Second. Bye, everybody.